Um, I'm already aware this is going to sound incredibly schizophrenic of me, but I cannot, okay, this started when I was playing Red Dead Redemption 2, and Dutch says you can't fight gravity. And I was like, And for some reason I started thinking about like Newton's laws of motions and like Newton's laws of motion and other theoretical physics and whatever, because I don't know, he talks about gravity, right? So hold on, I'm gonna move my glasses. Anyway, it really got me thinking about, um, well, again, Newton's laws of motion, and I was in my head thinking like, oh, I could make a really great analysis video on the story of Red Dead Redemption 2 and how like the whole story fits piece in piece into Newton's laws of motion. And then the more I started thinking about it, the more I was like, it doesn't just apply to Red Dead. It kind of applies to like just the way that you write literature and like tell a story in general. And the more I started thinking about that, the more I started thinking about, I wonder if you could write something that didn't fall into those, like something that defied those laws. Like those are physical laws. Those aren't, they shouldn't, like, why do they apply to writing and storytelling? And, that's interesting. And then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, you could try to defy the laws of motion, right? In your writing, you could write about nothing happening. You could write about, um, but then even that plays right into the first law of motion. You're writing about nothing happening because no action has been taken um, by any forces or anything. So it's just very fascinating. Like, you can't avoid it. You can't even write about something that's dead and decomposing. You can't even write that process without it fitting right into the laws of motion. Um, and it's just interesting because I don't think we appreciate enough that they're not just laws of motion. They're just fundamental to existence. They're not, how do I explain this without sounding schizophrenic? They're not just laws of motion and physics. I think we often think of them that way, but there is a broader connection to our everyday reality, and they do seep in a more tangible way to our everyday existence. Now, again, I'm not going to say this in the most poetic or meaningful way, and I'm sure someone smarter than me could elaborate a little bit more on what I'm hypothesizing here. Sorry, I'm like tangled in my blankets. I'm kind of freaking out. Anyway, let me just pull up on Wikipedia what the three laws of motion are. I've done, a bit of research, obviously, already on the three laws of motion, and I've thought very deeply about this. So I'm going to go kind of in depth on each point as to why I feel they relate to the human experience, storytelling, which again is just an extension of the human experience. So on a fundamental level, I'm just going to go down to the human experience. It's applicable in writing as well, so I might make the parallels. But anyway, the first law of motion, according to Wikipedia, it's just a paraphrasing of it, so pardon me if you've heard it differently. I have as well, but it says, a body remains at rest or in motion at a constant speed in a straight line unless it is acted upon by a force. So this has also been extended to, I'm sure you've heard, an object at rest stays at rest, an object in motion stays in motion. Fantastic, right? Well, you continue, like, think about it like this. Like, you continue about your day-to-day life. You continue the status quo. You wake up, you do your little morning routine, you get ready, unless something happens. You would continue more than likely to do that same routine unless you made the conscious decision not to partake in that routine for some reason or another. And even then, there's some force, some, not necessarily a physical force, but there's something compelling you to do that. There's always like a reason and a motivation behind everything. And those are more like the forces that I'll be speaking on when it comes to humans and action that we take. God, this is just so fascinating to me. I don't know, maybe it's baby's first philosophy here, but I can't really find much information on this. Like, I don't know what to search, maybe, but I can't find anybody else really talking about how the laws of motion kind of permeate more than just, classical mechanics and Newtonian mechanics and all that. Like, it goes beyond that. So, a body at rest a body remains at rest or in motion at a constant speed in a straight line unless it is acted upon by a force. So again, if you're not doing anything, you're just bed rotting, right? Like, you're not getting up, you're not moving at all. Like, the only thing, that would get you to go is some sort of force acting upon you. So a compulsion, or the realization that you have to use the restroom, or, well, in some, I suppose, hypothetically, you could just piss in the bed, but you get what I'm saying. Or again, day-to-day life, you'll go about your daily routine unless something happens to change that. Now, those happenings, again, can vary. They can be an outside force. Maybe your tire pops on your way to work, or you hit traffic or something, and that kind of throws off, your routine, or the constant speed that you maintain that day. Not literal speed, but like just the flow of the day. There's always external factors, or even, again, internal ones, compulsions, motivations that have built up over time within you that cause you to do something differently or to act in a different way than normal. So there's, so always some outside force acting upon you. Now, again, this is Newton was applying these to like objects. Like, if you put a ball on the ground, like, it's gonna stay there unless like something pushes it, is basically what he's saying. But think about how that applies to everyday life. I don't know. Again, this might sound schizophrenic. Who knows? Let's move on to to Newton's law number 2. That first one, by the way, is probably like the most obvious, like easiest to understand one. I'm going to get a little bit more hypothetical and like wishy-washy with point number 2 here, because it's more of a calculation than anything. It establishes a calculation for momentum and blah blah blah, speed, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, so the second law here on Wikipedia states, at any instance of time, the net force on a body is equal to the body's acceleration multiplied by its mass, or equivalently, the rate at which the body's momentum is changing with time. Again, this one's a bit difficult to understand, but like in a practical application sense. But the way I think of it is like, okay, so your acceleration would be like how fast, no, not how fast you're going. I mean, yes, the object, hold on. Let me look up, there is another definition that like it was a little bit clearer. Let me, Britannica, let's see. Okay, so the first law is the law of inertia, blah, 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 the law of inertia, thank you. F equals ma, so, okay, quantitative description of the changes that a force can produce on the motion of a body. It states that the time rate of change of the momentum of a body is equal in both magnitude and direction to the force imposed on it. The momentum of a body is equal to the product of its mass and its velocity. Yeah, force equals mass times acceleration. That's the thing. A force applied to a body can change the magnitude of the momentum or its direction, or both. Newton's second law is one of the most important in all of physics, blah, 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 F equals ma. So, yeah, force equals mass times acceleration. So, this one, again, a little bit harder to quantify, but I will use Red Dead Redemption 2 as an example. So, the speed at which things picked up within the gang, and like they started committing more crimes, and the bigger they got, so the mass and the acceleration, like the quicker they moved and the more, their crimes amped up. They went from robbing stages to robbing literal banks. Like, you get what I'm saying? That thing made the consequences of their actions worse. We can see this in real life applications as well. So I was on a jury trial, and it was a double homicide case, and the person responsible for the murders, it started off as him, don't remember the exact circumstances. He stole his girlfriend's car for one reason or another. Like he wasn't given permission to use it, but he did drive it on occasion, and he took it out. So he stole his girlfriend's car, right? And then he is having a meltdown. They're having an argument or something, and he's driving recklessly. And now the reckless driving in and of itself is a more minor crime. But that's where, we kind of start ramping it up. So he is very quickly going to accumulate a lot more crimes. So he gets into an accident at an intersection. And he then goes and flees the scene of the crime. Now, the acceleration starts here where the actions start piling up on him. He then attacks a police officer and kills him. And then, he's just wandering around trying to get away from the scene of the accident. And again, that's where we see the accumulation, the mass, and the acceleration. Like, things just were not going that quickly, but it was almost like something rolling downhill, and how it picked up speed very quickly. So the acceleration got very, very fast. This all happened very quickly. It went from, it took him half an hour to drive where he was going, to everything just accelerating very quickly. And then obviously the force being the consequences. So him being arrested and the charges he faced, they'll always equate to the crimes, if that makes sense. So, again, this one's a lot more theoretical, hypothetical. Like, you got to kind of think a little bit more about this one. It's a little bit more wishy-washy and less substantial. But again, I'm sure someone smarter than myself will kind of get what I'm saying and be able to elaborate in a more substantial manner, hopefully. Anyway, the last law of physics is the law of action and reaction. Now, again, this one kind of ties into what I was saying with the third law here. If two bodies exert force on each other, these forces have the same magnitude but in opposite directions. So every action has an equal and opposite reaction, is probably how you've heard this one stated before. Now, this kind of ties into my previous hypothesizations regarding, things being worse. So the magnitude of the Vanderlyn gang's crimes as they got worse, the actions that they took, the equal and opposite reaction would be increased forces being sent their way, the bounties on their heads getting higher. Like, there's always an equal and opposite reaction. And in the same way that Dutch could not fight gravity, he could also not fight this law. Now, similarly in real life, of course, if I were to yell at somebody, then chances are they're going to get mad. Equal and opposite reactions. I don't feel like this one needs elaboration. Similarly with the first one, it's kind of a little bit easier to understand. Now, this could be also an example of karma, because of course, like, if you yell at someone, they might not react that way. They might not react with anger, but they might also react with like an overwhelming kindness to like de-escalate the situation. So kind of, again, a reaction in the opposite direction. So they will react more than likely with as much extreme energy as you're providing, but it can go one of two ways. They could be super mad, or they could be super calm, overwhelmingly so, more so maybe than in everyday life. I don't know. They could also just not react at all. Some people do opt for that. So I guess that's kind of a poor example, but I don't know. A lot of people believe in like karma, like energy. The energy you put out there is the energy you get back. A lot of that mentality, and it very much so is real. We know, it's weird to me. People kind of dismiss this as like wishy-washy, like in line with like tarot cards and like whatever. But I think energy, while not real in like a literal sense per se, I do think there's a confirmation bias. I think that is like the word for it, and like people have come up with a lot of hooey dooey looey words for it. Like again, manifestation. Like I don't believe in manifestation. I believe in confirmation bias. So I believe that like, I don't know, my boyfriend was talking about getting a new car, and he really wanted a new car, and he was intent on getting a Subaru, and then he started seeing Subarus everywhere, and then, all this stuff. And like, of course, if you have something in the back of your mind, like your subconscious actions will be, directing you in a way that leads you toward whatever it is that you've been thinking about a lot. So, if you don't think you're worthwhile and you just think you're a piece of shit and whatever, like chances are that's the type of person you're going to end up dating. Like you're not gonna, more than likely gonna end up with somebody who's showing you the opposite of that. Like you're gonna look for confirmation bias. So someone who treats you like shit. It's again, confirmation bias is to me like like the real version of manifestation. But I also kind of believe it plays into like a little bit of karmic energy and like concepts as well, because if you're a piece of shit, then you're gonna get shit back. Like it could take a while, of course. Like I had this really crappy old boss. I won't get into the details of that, but like I've never worked for anyone worse than this woman, and I ended up just quitting on a whim one day, just no notice, just quit. And I'm not like that. I'm like a very scared person. And I don't do things like that, but I just literally couldn't take it. Like my options that day felt like I was either going to go to the nearby train station and walk in front of a train, or I had to quit my job. And I made the decision to quit my job because I didn't actually want to die. I just didn't want to be at work. So it was like, logically speaking, death is not the answer here. But those were my, in my mind, my only two options. Like it was that extreme of a situation. So I got out of that. It took 3.5 years for me to see any sort of like real comeback for her being, not a great person in general in her daily life. And it came back fucking hard. Not only did the store that I used to work at close about a year, no, it had to have been like 2 years. 2 years after I stopped working there. It did not last very long. It was a year and a half, 2 years. They closed doors. They were shut down. It was kind of unrelated. It was just the corporation was doing sweeping closures, and I don't know. The store wasn't profitable enough. It didn't meet I don't know, whatever. None of my business why it closed. I know it closed, so she got shipped off to be the manager of a different store. Now this store is, I just heard last week, it's just absolutely covered in rat shit. Just everywhere. And they had about 50 expired baby formulas on the shelves that the people that went to help them out and, help them kind of get their stuff in order for something. I don't know why they were there. They were helping with something. They, tried to tell the manager, like, hey, we got to pull these off the shelves. They're expired by like 6 months. Like, that's not even like, oh, they're just falling within the expiration window, because you do have to pull things within a certain date range. So even if it's not expired, you're pulling things that expire within the next week. Typically for things like milk and dairy products, you're looking for shorter time frames. Things like medications, you'll typically pull like 60 to 90 days out. So, a couple months out from what the current date is. So a lot of the products we get rid of are not expired. Those were already expired baby formulas, expired by 6 months. Now, the one thing that I knew is like, you just don't fuck with baby formula. You don't. Like, that's one of the few things that like you can mess around with. Like, yeah, if someone's chips are a couple days over, it's no, it's no harm, no foul. Like, yeah, that's gross, but like, whatever. It's not the same when it comes to like baby formula, baby medication, things of that nature. Like there's a lot harsher penalties, and also like real life penalties, like fees and fines, but also just again, like, hello, a baby could die. Anyway, so yeah, they pulled them off the shelves, and the person that was there was like telling her, you can't do that. You have to pull these. Like, what if an auditor came in? Well, as soon as that crew left from helping that day, she then took them out of the bins and put them all back on the shelves, because that's what she did to fudge her numbers, because the more you scan out, the more loss you're taking. So rather than scan out these 50 cans of expensive ass baby formula, she put them back on the shelves, and the very next day an auditor came, and that just, like, that is like, the fees and fines associated with that, and this is like karma for me. So yeah, I feel like she's already heading down like the path again. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, so she was nothing but horrible and all these things, and now things are kind of falling apart for her. Finally, it has only taken 3 fucking years, but it's happening. So again, not necessarily karmic energy, more, again, this just kind of goes into like confirmation bias, and I think confirmation bias, again, kind of plays into Newton's third law of motion. So anyway, a little bit of tea for your patience, but anyway, I hope this makes sense and doesn't sound super schizophrenic, and if anyone understands what I'm talking about and like feels this passionate about this subject, could you please help me elaborate, because I literally just don't have the words or the brain cells to further expand upon these ideas and concepts. But I would love to engage in a conversation about this. Again, I haven't been able to find any articles or anything about how Newton's laws of writings tie in with Newton's laws of physics tie in with like writing in general, or just everyday life in a more meaningful way than just like physical worlds, like bouncing a bouncy ball or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, I genuinely believe that these are like fundamental principles of like our existence. And I guess you could say like, oh yeah, well, we exist in the physical world, of course we're participating in physics, but I'm not talking about physics per se. Again, I'm talking about like our thoughts motivating us and compelling us to do things. Like, these aren't physical things that are happening. Like, I guess the neurons firing, whatever, like you could argue on some level it's all physics, but, and like, yeah, I get what you mean, but like, do you understand what I'm saying though? That's what I don't know. Anyway, thank you for listening. I'm gonna go away now and not talk about this again, because I don't want to be sent to an asylum. Anyway, goodbye.